Now let's talk about getting everything hooked up. So if you have a laptop and this is your first time getting it set up, in regards to like the hookup process, only thing that you need to do as far as hooking up the cords for the laptop is you might need to take the charger, plug one end into an outlet, probably in your home or office, and then take the other part of the cord and that input, put it into the charger slot of your laptop, typically going to be on the top left or right side of your computer typically. And from there, you want to make sure it's fully charged. But otherwise, when it comes to the cords and stuff like that, that's pretty much all when it comes to hooking up a laptop for the first time. But really, in this video, I want to go more into depth about the desktop portion because that can be a little bit more hands-on in the sense of more you have to do more. But don't worry, it's not all these different inputs on the right here, so don't go to overwhelmed. Most of those you actually won't need to really deal with or know about, but I wanted to show you the picture of what you can expect them to look like, so that's why I included it anyways, so that way you know about it. So I'm gonna do this in the most, again, simplistic way of how to essentially hook everything up when it comes to your desktop. Now I also included a picture here in one of the previous slides that we had, which shows on the right here, this is considered a tower, and then this is a monitor that has a screen. You have the keyboard as you have in the desktops, and also a USB wired, so you can see the wire right there, mouse. So when it comes to the setup portion of this, here's what you're going to want to do. Now, if you are having something like this here, where you have basically the tower and the monitor are separate pieces, so you can see they're two different pieces, meaning this is not built into here. And how you would know if you have one that is built in is if if you bought one brand new and it came from the store, typically it's gonna be already installed then, but at the same time too, make sure you're not buying just a monitor. They do sell monitors individually, so if you are getting something that comes with a basically a monitor and screen, keyboard and mouse, there's probably a good likelihood that that component is built into here. But also just to verify, if before you may either make a purchase on this or anything of that sort, just ask the person that you are around as far as in the store, meaning some type of worker there, to ask them if that's the case. So I want to make sure I'm giving you correct advice, and if I can't see what you're looking at, it's gonna be hard for me to 100% confirm that, but I just recommend that you ask someone if you weren't sure. And so then from there, let's say again, we're going back to the setup process here of hooking everything up in regards to the cords. So it's a very similar process as far as whether it's built in or not. What you'd want to do is I'd recommend starting all this whole process exactly where you plan on keeping the desktop, because again, remember, it's much harder to essentially move the desktop. In other words, it's not as portable compared to, say, a laptop. So when it comes to that, then something that I really think is important for you to know about is, maybe start opening up the package or whatever by an office desk or some type of desk or something of that sort. I'd first put the monitor on the desk or table itself, but I would actually have it backwards at first, meaning instead of me seeing the screen, I would actually flip it around, because that's where the inputs are going to be. As far as using the actual monitor itself, it's going to have its own cords, along with also the tower. I would likely recommend that you either put it on top of basically the monitor, or what you can do too is you can put it on the ground, typically out of the way but still in reach, on the ground as well. But just be aware it can't be too far away, because the cords need to be able to connect to each other, so it can only be so far away from each other. And then when it comes to that, so how exactly do you go about this? So let's say, for an example, you decided to put the tower on the ground, the monitor, of course, on the table, along with the keyboard and mouse. So the first thing you're going to want to do, there's not per se right or wrong here, but this is how I would do it, which is the keyboard is likely going to have a wire to it that is a USB input. What you're going to do then with that is that you're gonna then actually then plug that into, chances are it can actually be either, depending on essentially how your computer is, meaning like is this built in? If this is built into the monitor, you'll want to plug that USB cord into the monitor because it'll have that input. Otherwise, if you have an individual tower and the screen / monitor is separate, you will want to plug that USB cord from the keyboard into the tower. And behind the tower, this is the front of the tower here, typically there should be cords behind the inputs behind the tower that will have something like this, where the USB is on its side like that. That is a USB still. And from there, what you'll want to then do is do the same thing with the keyboard. So essentially, you should probably have many of the USB inputs on the back of the tower. Plug those into it. Make sure none of the cords or wiring is going to be too stretched where either A, you can't use it, or B, it could break. So just be aware of that, and make sure it's not too far away from each other. From there, what you'll want to do too is there should have been a cord that came along with your package that is the power supply. So you plug that into essentially this input that'll be on the back of the tower itself, and that's really what's going to give the whole unit power, because you're going to be basically taking the other 3 prongs and putting that into some type of wall outlet. From there, if that's what you then have done so far, the next thing then what I would then do is you'll want to then basically press this, which is an on-off switch. That's going to be typically, actually I'd say a lot of the times, going to be on the front of the desktop itself somewhere, and it can even be in form of a button like this, where essentially that's like the on and off button. That's like the on and off logo right there. So you can typically see that, and I bet that right there, I know it's hard to see, but I bet that is the on and off button right there. And you can typically tell because it's pretty much right, it's supposed to be pretty evident where it is and whatnot, to make it easy on you to be able to turn on and off your computer. Also too, what's important to know is desktops, as far as like the monitors itself, also have an on and off button. And that would be typically right there. It's either going to be on the bottom right, sometimes in the middle, sometimes below here. Most of the time it's be on the right side, and you'll know again because it'll have this icon. And what you'll want to do is first turn on the tower, so make sure it's plugged in, and then make sure it's turning on. You'll know it's turning on by simply the on and off button will typically light up, where there'll be a light behind it that starts sometimes even flashing. That's how you know that the desktop is starting to essentially get running. From there, also too, there's going to be typically some type of HDMI cord, or sometimes it can also be a different type of, it's typically going to be some type of like HDMI port, something of this sort, where you would actually plug it into the back of the tower and plug it into the monitor itself, so that way you can actually see what's going on inside the tower itself. So this kind of gives you, a view / control of the tower itself and whatnot. Regardless, you will need to do that in order to see what's happening with your computer and be able to move forward. Once you have then done all of those things, for the high majority of the time, that is all you're going to need to know as far as being able to set things up. And typically when you do have things already set up, meaning you've already plugged all the cords in and whatnot, then in the future all it should take is you basically press the on and off button, the on off button in this case to turn it on, and then from there press the monitor / screen on by clicking this button here. Then it should take you through the prompts of it getting all, either rebooting or getting started up again, and that way you can then once again control it. So the first time around, meaning getting everything hooked up, is going to take the longest, but otherwise after that it should be very quick. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to ask. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to talking to you in the next video.